Hello humans, Master Dinnerflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve, and today I will be talking about the new deck building set, or as I should say, the new engine building set. So, from testing, from talking over the set with other people, and just watching people play test it, every single deck that is being introduced in that set is an engine. It doesn't really do much on its own, but if you were to take out all the nonsense that the deck is trying to do, you actually have really insane engines for other decks. Now that's a little weird. Because we do get decks from time to time that realistically they could only ever be an engine. Like Invoked is one of them, Wind Witch is another one. There's not enough monsters to play that strategy on its own. But then, it's fine then, because it's like, not all the time, but we're literally getting a deck building set where every single deck within it is going to be an engine to another deck, and that feels very weird. I don't know how I feel about that, probably not great, but that's not what I'm here to discuss, because these engines, what I actually want to go over is the way they can be utilized in a bunch of random decks. You might not realize it, but all those engines can be used in something we currently have access to, and we'll probably have more in the future. So, as you can see here, let's go over the first of these three decks, and that is Punk. Now, Punk, you would think this is the least interesting because it required the most amount of cards and it did the least. It felt like the most whatever meh synchro deck. But in all actuality, this is not a rank 3. This is not like a synchro deck of random synchro climbing. What it actually is an Axis 3 engine. And let me show you, these first 10 cards are all starters to this Axis 3 engine. I'm not joking. Literally all of these cards are access to that engine. So let me go into depth. So what these cards do is, while they're on the field, you can pay 600 life points to apply their effect. And then when they're sent to the graveyard, they can apply an effect to a punk they control. But that's not too important unless you want to chain block with this engine, which won't happen too much. But what we want to discuss here is the fact that this is just easy access 3, and I'll show you. So this one, you pay 600 life points to search any punk in your deck except itself. This one, you can discard it to search any punk except a level 8 monster. And this one, you can discard it, then send a card from your hand to the graveyard by an effect to summon a punk from the deck except a level 8 monster. Or except itself. Yeah, it's except a level 8 monster. So what you can do is, let's say you start with this, you can search Foxy Tune, which will discard itself and another card to summon another level 3 from deck. Or, if you start with this, you can discard it to search this, which will do the same thing. Or if you start with this, you can discard it and another card to search this, to search the level 3 because we haven't normal summoned yet. And then teleport is teleport. So, all of these get you access to 2 level 3s. But not just 2 level 3s, 2 level 3 tuners. So, basically, when you apply this, you go through all these cards, but then your other level 3 can be another copy if you don't want to commit a bunch of extra garnets to this engine, because you could realistically just play 10. You would just have to make sure you have another normal summon. Like, because this can't search itself, so if this gets special summoned, you need something that can kind of be normal summoned. But anyways, you can go this one, which you can pay 600 life points to search a trap of punk. And this is the best one. The other one, targets, sets, and destroys it. Now, we won't go over its bonus effect if you control a punk, because realistically, we are just using this as an engine for Cherubini or Fibrax. And if we're doing that, then we won't get to use this other effect. Whereas this one, its main effect is to negate an opponent's monster effect, and then its bonus effect is to gain life. So this one is definitely better. So you can do that, but realistically, you don't even have to play these two cards if you don't want to, because if you use this to special summon this, you can just go ahead and search this, which will discard it to search another copy, and then there you go. So you don't actually have to play these two cards, but I think it's nice that it's like this engine not only gets you to an Access 3 part, but it also gets negation in the process. So that's kind of cool. But that's the idea with this engine. To put it quite simply, the problem with a lot of Fibrax engines, like the generic good stuff Fibrax you'd see in like Eldritch and whatnot, they all have dead ends. Like Despot 003, like 001 is the dead end. Or like Righty-Lefty Driver, I think Lefty is the dead end, I can't remember. But it's one of them. And then like, the only one that isn't a dead end is Diva, but there's only 3 of them. Whereas this one, between these 10 cards, there are no dead ends. And in addition to that, it's like 10. Like, this completely... It's literally 1/4 of your deck is a Fibrax. That is just insanely simple. And it also goes for Cherubini. Because a deck that we know who loves to make Cherubini, and loves a card like Foxy Tune, which gets dead cards out of your hand, is Phantom Knights. Because if you even draw Torn Scales, and then a way to play with the Punk, it doesn't matter, because you get to discard Torn Scales with Foxy, and then once you make Cherubini, this will Torn Scales will come back once you banish a Phantom Knight, where you can then use the effect, and you know you'll have full combo. Which is exactly what you want to look for when you're looking for synergies between decks, is if you can draw the 2 best parts of both decks. If it's better than the sum of the parts originally, those 2 decks have synergy, and this is a perfect example. So this is the first example with Punk. Now let's go to the next one. Now these other 2, I don't think I need to go into as much detail, but to make it simple, this is the Brave Token engine. Now, you have 7 starters, which are right here. Foolish Burial, Aquamancer, and Armatia, or Armagia. I keep mispronouncing it, but very simply, these 7 cards are a way to make a negation engine super, super early. And when I say super early, I genuinely mean, like, your, like, second summon is an Omni Negation, which is kind of insane, but there's one major restriction that you have to keep in mind if you want to play this engine. The turn you activate this, when you activate Armagia, you cannot activate the effect of a monster that is normal summoned that turn. So that's kind of a big deal. Because a lot, even though we do have decks that don't trigger that, we still have a lot of decks like normal summon effect. So if you take out that part of the deck, it feels like you need to play a deck that all of its starters, not just some, but literally all of its starters don't trigger on normal summon. And that is a little weird. Because yes, technically, you can still play it in a deck that doesn't trigger, that like doesn't have normal summon starters, but in order to do that, you need to have a way to trigger them on special summon, if that makes sense. Because you really, really cannot expect this to work properly if you're like, if you have Tour Guide in hand and you have this, those are complete contradictions, and you've just erased a card from your hand. You don't want to do things like that. You want to instead normal summon a Print Kid, it does nothing, and then have Armagia, and then you just get to have a negate. And the whole joke of, haha, Print Kids lose to a hand trap doesn't apply anymore. That's what you want to do. And there are more decks than just Print Kids that does this. But keep in mind, you really have to keep in mind, this engine does need a kind of... It needs you to respect its actual restriction, because I know what's going to happen is the moment we get this archetype and we start splashing in, you're going to see it in a deck that just completely straight up contradicts. So you'll like see this in Evil Eye or Invoked, which literally those two requirements contradict each other, but you will see it. It's just something that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players don't understand, is the only time archetypes have synergy is when you draw the two best parts of the archetype, and they're better than if you were to just draw them one alone. You don't have to compete for which one you want to do instead. They just both play. And going into the requirements of this engine, Journey of Destiny and Wandering Griffin Rider. So Griffin Rider isn't that bad to draw, because even if you just have nothing, you have no part of this engine besides it can just special summon itself as your first monster. That's kind of fine. It's kind of like Cyber Dragon. But Journey of Destiny, on the other hand, is a straight up brick if you don't see this. You cannot do anything with this card. But that's the true only brick. And another one, if you're going to play the Dragon Steed, this is also a pretty bad brick. But either way, you don't actually have to play this one at all. I'll keep it over here. But this is the main core of these decks, the 7 cards, and then Wandering Griffin Rider. And what I wanted to point out is, even if you don't like this engine, you don't like having it negate early, which that doesn't make any sense, there is something you can still do with this engine even if Griffin Rider didn't exist, and that is super simply that Rite of Armesia is still 2 monsters without a normal summon, because you activate this and then you get Journey of Destiny, which searches Aquamancer, and that's 2 monsters. You could turn the Brave token into Link Spider, and then you can go Verte Dragoon, set 7 pass. I know a lot of people love doing that. So this engine even allows that to happen. But I really think, if you're going to be playing this, I think the Griffin Rider is the best way to go. I don't even think you should play Dragon Steed, at any level. Unless you're, very specifically playing a going second deck, this card just seems very underwhelming. But that's it for the second engine. Like I said, I didn't want to go into too much detail because you guys probably already know what this engine is as you're seeing it. So let's go into the last one. Now, the last one I want to go over, I have gone over before. There's an entire video on my channel just going over this engine, and that is the Exorcisters. So unlike the other two, where they became engines because once you cut out all the fat, you realize it can just accomplish something better in another deck. This one's a little different because the fundamental issue of this deck makes it so incredibly flawed that it could never really stand on its own. The fact that it requires your opponent to do something while at the same time telling your opponent that this will happen if they do it, and the monsters telling them to do that at most have only 800 defense, that's not gonna work. There's no universe where that makes any logical sense that you think that's good. There's no universe where you think that's good. But what I was going over is that the normal trap, Vadis, it doesn't tell your opponent that it's there because it's a trap card. And in addition to that, even if your opponent just doesn't do much of anything to try to play around this card, you can just activate it on your following turn and then just make an XC that banishes a thing and searches another copy. So this idea is kind of fine. You effectively, whenever your opponent activates a card or effect that at resolution would move a card from the graveyard in any way, you chain this to that effect, and you will special summon one of the 2 pairs. After their card effect resolves, you will special summon the XC Elise, and then whichever one you think is optimal besides that, the Elise will banish a card they control or in their graveyard, which is nice, and then the other one will apply another effect. This one is a breakthrough skill. The other one, this one, your opponent can't special summon from the graveyard. And the last one is literally just Abyss Dweller. And then going back into your turn, you can attach for Elise to search another trap. You can attach for this to boost XEs up. This one you can attach to search a monster. and this one you can detach to bounce a card. And then afterwards, after you use all their effects, they have no more materials, and you've gotten all this card advantage off of them. You can then overlay both into Future, into Draco Future, and then off of one trap, you've banished a card they control, you've bounced or applied another effect, you've searched 1 to 2 cards, and you just literally just swung the game with a single trap resolution. Now, this is the idea with this Exorcist engine. Now, the problem that you might have when working on this engine early is that the pairs... This is why I think that Archetype was actually made to be terrible, because the pairs don't actually complement each other. Because instead of, like, one is a special summon and then the other is a draw, instead the pairs are like, 2 of them are the same kind of effect and the other 2 are the same kind of other effect. So they don't complement each other, they're just a repeat of what that pair already has. Like, this one special summons itself from the hand, and this one special summons an Exorcist from the hand. And these are the best 2 pairs. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why isn't this one a special summon? And then, like, why isn't this a pair? Like, why is Elise and Sophia not a pair, but 2 repeating effects is a pair? And these ones are the same thing. This one replaces an Exorcist in your hand for a draw, and this one draws if you control an Exorcist. Like, they don't complement each other. They're just a repeat of the same effect. Which kind of, like, it doesn't make them a pair. It doesn't make them a tag team. It just makes them clones of each other. And I think that's really bad card design, honestly. Like, the deck is all about having a pair of these cards, and the pairs don't actually complement each other. They kind of make themselves redundant, and I really don't like that. But I think the special summons ones are the best pair, because if you draw them, you can just still use them. Whereas these ones will just sit dead in your hand. Even though they are draws, they're gonna just sit there dead. Now this one is also a little tricky to find what kind of decks it goes in. But very simply, it's looking for a mid-range XC deck, or an XC deck that isn't all about throwing its entire hand into, like, an okay average board. So, like, Time Thieves that aren't about the Raid Raptor stuff, they're kind of just more like, I'm playing Time Thieves, I'm going to set a few cards, and I'm going to disrupt you with my XEs. This is kind of one of the ways this deck could work, because, like, you get to make 2 XEs, and the XEs you're making complement the Time Thieves, because they're all about just taking away the material off the card to use their effects. And Trap Tricks, because this is a normal trap that can trigger Sarah, and, like, make a bunch of XEs, and that deck already has a little awkward time pushing without just random cards in the extra deck. But, the reason you want this to be in a kind of mid-rangey rank 4 deck is if you have access to the engine you're already playing, you can put 2 extra level 4s, like in Time Thief, like in Trap Trick, to make into an XC Elise to go ahead and just search the trap. So that way, the rank 4 engine you're actually playing can access the trap without you needing to just draw one of them. So that's the idea of this being played in, like, mid-rangey, control-y XC decks, is you can access the engine yourself if you don't draw it, but if you draw it, it complements what you already have. But that's gonna be it from me. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of insight about the way these engines are gonna work. And I'm really curious to see, I'm really curious if we're going to see them. But that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Interflex will take your soul.